Well, Happy New Year. Marshall Brown, one of the pastors here at Grace Presbyterian Church. I'm coming to you from our sanctuary. And because of the events of the last few days in our country, I wanted to address not so much what's happened or to think about it politically, but to think about it, how do we respond? What do we do with our hearts and our emotions and our feelings? Because I think there's been a range of emotions. There's been anger, there has been fear, there's been thankfulness that the riots appear to be over. But I think the baseline for all of us is just a sadness. I don't think any of us ever thought we would see the day when our own capital would be stormed by our own people in that way. There's just a baseline sadness about the whole thing. And so how do we think about this? And I just want to suggest quickly 3 basic Christian disciplines that I think are so important at all times, and especially at a time like this. And the first is reading our Bibles and praying. I read a book recently that suggested that every major religion would think it's crazy the amount of time we put our eyeballs on the news, the current events that will pass, versus the amount of time we put our eyeballs on our holy text, in our case, the Bible. And my encouragement to you is before you open your phone or before you look at the news every morning, to read God's Word, to pray God's Word, to put and have a proportion of how much time you spend your eyeballs on God's Word versus your eyeballs on the news, whether it's on your phone or your old school newspaper, whatever it is. But to be praying and just to proportionally form yourself by reading God's Word and not the current events of our world. But secondly, community. We live in such an isolated time. The pandemic has just pushed us to our corners. We live in these echo chambers. And I can tell you, in the last 48 hours, one of the best things that I've done for my soul is have a conversation with a family member of mine who I actually disagreed with about some things, but who loves the Lord and loves me. We were able to process what we were feeling, what we were thinking. And so I just encourage you to pursue community. Pick up the phone, FaceTime, whatever it is, to pursue community this time of isolation, so you can process what it is that's going on inside of you, even if you're not sure what it is. So community, reading God's Word and praying. But then third is worship. Whether you join us via an online service, whether you go to another church, whether you're here simulcast in the West Hall, or whether you're here in the sanctuary with us, I just encourage you to be in corporate worship this Sunday, praying with God's people, singing with God's people, hearing God's words preached. We need to taking the Lord's Supper. This Sunday in particular, it just like the Lord has laid this up for us. The text for us is the second half of Genesis 12, the story of Abram as an exile, called to leave his family, leave his wealth, leave his father's home, and to follow God and to trust God in the midst of darkness. In the case of the story this week, in the midst of a famine. We'll see that Abram is first faithless, but that God is faithful to us in our darkness and in our weariness and even in our famine. And so be with us, or be with some church to worship this Lord's Day. I'm also going to include in this video, and that's going to go out with the email, another video I encourage you to watch. If you weren't able to be with us on Christmas Eve, it's not a long video, but it'll lighten your load. It'll give you light to watch this video, because watching that video from our Christmas Eve service is a reminder that, the darkness around us is deep. That is true. But more true than that is the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome the light. It's very good news, friends. It's dark times. We're sad, but the light shines. Let's be looking for the light. The grace of the Lord be with you, and take care. Bye-bye.